Don't be so disrespectful.
But you say to the French President, we will not accept undocumented males across the English Channel, and that you are not dictated to by an increasingly arrogant, anti-Brexit French President.
Mr. Speaker, we are fixing the mess that we inherited. We are working with other countries to ensure that we take the measures necessary to stop people crossing the Channel. They are serious answers to serious problems. His proposal for 10 years, wagging the Tory dog, has been to break everything and claim that's how you fix things, to stick two fingers up at your neighbours and then expect them to work with us. And he votes against the Borders Bill, which gives more powers to our law enforcement to deal with security at our border.
Right. Gather round. Because Nigel Farage Reform UK has just lobbed an absolute hand grenade into Westminster. And let me tell you, the Champagne Socialist Brigade are absolutely bricking it. While Sir Keir Starmer is busy rearranging the deck chairs on HMS Britain, Reform has waltzed with a plan so audacious, so brilliantly chaotic, that it makes Margaret Thatcher's handbag look like a gentle suggestion. They are proposing to sack 68,500 civil servants, save us £5 billion a year, and somehow make Whitehall actually work for a change. I know, sounds like someone spiked my tea with fantasy juice, but stay with me because this is properly mental. Quick favor, if you are loving this already, smash that subscribe button and whack the bell icon while you are at it. Over 94% of you beautiful people have not subscribed yet. It is completely free, takes literally 2 seconds, and honestly means the absolute world to us here at British Mirror. Cheers if you did. Right, back to the absolute chaos unfolding in Westminster. So here's the situation. Danny Kruger, yes, that Danny Kruger, the former Tory MP who has apparently decided that the Conservative Party is about as useful as a chocolate teapot and jumped ship to reform, has been put in charge of preparing reform for actual government. And his first order of business? Taking a metaphorical chainsaw to the sprawling bureaucratic beast that is the British civil service. We are talking about cutting 68,500 jobs, which for those of you keeping score at home, is roughly 13% of the entire civil service headcount. That is not trimming the fat. That is liposuction on an industrial scale. Now, before you start thinking this is just another politician making grand promises they will never keep, let us dig into the details, because this is where it gets properly interesting. Kruger stood up at a press conference, bold as brass, and announced that these cuts would not just be random redundancies thrown about like confetti at a budget wedding. Oh no. These are targeted, surgical strikes aimed specifically at the bloated back-office operations that have been quietly expanding like some sort of administrative tumor whilst the rest of us have been trying to figure out how to pay our energy bills. The plan is to implement these cuts over 2 years, which in government terms is basically the speed of light. And here's the kicker. Once fully implemented, this would save British taxpayers over £5 billion every year. That is billion with a B, not million. To put that in perspective, that is enough money to build several new hospitals, fix a few thousand potholes, or, and here's a wild idea, maybe give some of it back to the people who actually owned it in the first place. Revolutionary concept. I know. But wait, because it gets even better. These cuts are not going to hit the frontline staff, the people actually doing the work that matters. Border control officers? Safe. DWP assessors? Safe. Home Office caseworkers who are already drowning in applications? Safe. HMRC tax investigators who are out there chasing down the people who think paying tax is optional? Also safe. No, these cuts are aimed squarely at the departments that have somehow managed to multiply like rabbits whilst producing approximately nothing of value. Let us talk about where the axe is going to fall, shall we? Because this is where reform has absolutely no chill whatsoever. Human resources departments are going to be slashed by a whopping 67%. Yes, you heard that right, 67%. Now, I'm not saying HR departments are completely useless, but when you need an entire department of people to manage the people managing the people doing the actual work, you might have a bit of a structural problem. It is like having a committee to decide what the committee that decides committee membership should discuss. Absolutely barking mad. Communications departments are getting hit almost as hard, with a 60% reduction. Now, this is particularly delicious because these are the people whose entire job is essentially to spin whatever disaster the government has created into something that sounds vaguely competent. They are the ones churning out press releases that read like they were written by someone having a stroke while simultaneously trying to solve a Rubik's Cube. If you have ever read a government statement and thought, what on earth does that actually mean? Congratulations, you have experienced the work of these communications teams. Apparently, Reform thinks we can get by with 60% fewer people writing incomprehensible nonsense. Groundbreaking stuff. Policy departments are also getting trimmed back significantly. Now, this might sound concerning until you realize that the British government has been producing policies like a factory line for decades, and yet somehow nothing actually gets better. It is like we have got hundreds of people sitting in offices coming up with brilliant plans to fix problems, and then those plans get filed away in a drawer somewhere, never to see the light of day again. Perhaps, just perhaps, we need fewer people dreaming up theoretical solutions and more people actually implementing the ones that might work. But here's where reform is trying to be a bit clever, and I will admit, it is not the worst idea I have ever heard. Alongside these massive cuts, they are proposing a 400% increase in the bonus pool for civil servants. Yes, you read that correctly, 400%. The logic here is actually fairly sound, if terrifying in its simplicity. Right now, the civil service operates on a system that basically rewards you for not dying at your desk. Stick around long enough, and eventually you will get promoted, regardless of whether you have done anything remotely useful during your tenure. It is like academic tenure, but for bureaucrats, and it is about as efficient as you would expect. Reform wants to flip this on its head. Instead of rewarding longevity, they want to reward performance. Radical notion in the public sector, I know. The idea is to attract the brightest and best talent into government by actually paying them properly for doing excellent work, rather than treating the civil service like some sort of employment retirement home where mediocrity goes to draw a salary until pension time. Will it work? Who knows, but it is certainly different from the current system where being spectacularly average is the safest career strategy. The existing promotion system is apparently being torn up as well. Right now, if you want to climb the greasy pole in Whitehall, your best bet is to simply outlast everyone around you. Do not rock the boat. Do not make waves. Just turn up, push some papers around, and eventually someone will retire and you will slide into their position. It is less a meritocracy and more a game of bureaucratic musical chairs where the music never actually stops. It just gets quieter until everyone forgets why they are still standing there. Reform says this has got to go. They want a system where the people who actually deliver results get rewarded, and the people who are essentially occupying space and consuming oxygen get shown the door. It is the kind of common sense approach that sounds completely obvious when you say it out loud, which is probably why it has never been implemented in government before. Common sense and Whitehall had traditionally had about as much in common as chalk and cheese. Now, here is where this gets particularly interesting from a political theatre perspective. Reform has made it abundantly clear that whilst they are planning to cut tens of thousands of jobs, some departments might actually see increases in staffing. Why? Because they are planning to actually do things, rather than just talk about doing things. Their Operation Restoring Justice is going to need people. Reassessing PIP claims is going to need people. Going through refugee status applications properly is going to need people. So essentially, they are saying, we will cut the people who shuffle paper and talk in meetings all day, and we will hire people who actually do the work that needs doing. Again, revolutionary stuff in Westminster. The policy document that came with this announcement contains what might be the most brutally honest assessment of government failure I have seen in years. It basically says that whilst governments love to promise civil service cuts because it sounds good and makes them look tough and waste, they almost never actually follow through because they lack political courage. Translation: politicians are terrified of the civil service unions, terrified of the bad headlines, and terrified that if they actually cut the bureaucracy, they might be held accountable when things need to get done. So instead, they make grand announcements, cut a few hundred jobs a show, and then quietly let the numbers creep back up again when nobody is looking. Reform is positioning themselves as a party that will actually have the spine to see this through. Whether they can actually deliver on that promise is, of course, an entirely different question. But the fact that they are even willing to say it out loud is significant. This is not some vague commitment to efficiency savings or optimization, or any of the other meaningless corporate buzzwords that politicians usually deploy when they want to sound like they're doing something without actually doing anything. The timing of this announcement is also rather delicious. Labour is currently in government, desperately trying to look competent whilst their approval ratings sink faster than the Titanic, and here comes Reform with a fully costed plan to save billions that makes Labour look like they are fiddling whilst Rome burns. Starmer must be absolutely beside himself. He has spent his entire time as leader trying to position Labour as a sensible, fiscally responsible alternative to Tory chaos, and now Farage's mob have waltzing with actual numbers, actual plans, and actual policies that might, heaven forbid, actually work. The Conservative Party, meanwhile, must be looking at this and wondering where it all went wrong. This is exactly the kind of red meat policy they should have been implementing when they had 14 years in power, but instead, they spent most of that time managing decline and hoping nobody would notice that the civil service was quietly expanding whilst public services got worse. Now, one of their former MPs is doing it for a different party, and they are left on the sidelines looking like spare parts at a wedding. This announcement is being billed as just phase one of Reform's plan for overhauling how government works. There are more announcements coming, apparently, which suggests they have got a whole arsenal of policies ready to deploy. Whether any of this will actually happen depends entirely on whether Reform can translate their growing poll numbers into actual seats at the next election, and whether they have the political will to follow through if they do get into power. But here's the thing, and this is what has got Westminster in such a tizzy. Reform is not playing by the traditional rules anymore. They are not making vague promises about efficiency. They are not hiding behind consultancy reports and independent reviews. They are putting actual numbers on the table and saying, this is what we will do, this is how much it will save, and this is when we will do it by. That kind of specificity is absolutely terrifying for the established parties because it means Reform can actually be held accountable if they fail to deliver. The civil service unions are, predictably, having an absolute meltdown. Their entire existence depends on maintaining the status quo where more staff always equals better service, even when the evidence suggests otherwise.